Rose grow the rushes loyal to the people. The strong reeds were raised from the Bragus. To this day, the bulk of their soldiers come from the Dower Fens, and they know the wetlands better than anyone else. Since the Jotun returned to steal their homeland, they have been amid the reeds, resisting the invaders. This despite the unhappiness some of their countryfolk still feel towards the Empire. And we must not forget that many Bragus are marshfolk first, marchers second, and imperial citizens a distant third. Yet the reeds have remained true to the oath of their general, fighting from the rushes and the deep fens to bamboozle the barbarian invaders wherever they can. They are in a perilous situation, for all their skill at laying low. The Queen of Kalsi herself, Jösa Jansdottir, sent the Lion of the North to root out the reeds and their sympathizers. The Bragus army has been left exposed, and those who offer them succor left in mortal danger. The Jotun are closing in on their hidden encampments, deep in the fens. It has become more and more difficult for them to move or take action without the barbarians descending upon them in force. During the autumn equinox, Imperial heroes used the Sentinel Gate to come to their aid. In Grey Fens, they intercepted the Jotun champions ordered to hunt out the havens of the strong reeds. Both Godi Melka and the Yagara champion, Isa Winterborn, were brought low. The latter success in particular being cause for a muted celebration. A thorn in the Empire's side for years, Imperial heroes brought Isa to ground at Lihi Moss, and her warband has withdrawn back to their stronghold in Skalahan. They will not return to fight the Empire again, until some new hero raises the Walrus banner and walks the path of the rare Yagara champions. Unfortunately, their success was not unqualified. They were unable to prevent one of the champions from rallying her warband. Barely has the equinox ended before Seeker Alma, a skilled tracker from the hills of Rhinos, leads a contingent of Lysambrian Jotun into the sleepy village of Catchment, deep in the fens. Some 200 Marcher soldiers, taken by surprise, are slain or captured before they can flee. A grievous loss, but one that could have been significantly worse had the Empire's heroes been less thorough. Alma continues to harry the Bragus across the marches, striking without warning against sanctuaries that have been secret for generations. Yet, despite this, the reeds remain in Bragusland. They endure, and when the order comes, they will rise. Rise. Granite-faced Derren Stone Tower and the Tower of the North continues to work alongside Geirfund Hagastottir, standing in for King Gudmundur Aransson as General of the Fist of Ulven, ruling Bragusland with a mailed fist. Yet many of the barbarian heroes are champing the bit, eager for honourable battle against the Marcherfolk and their allies. As a people, the Jotun tend to have little time for stealth and the subtle manoeuvring of spies and scouts. Let others seek the strong reeds. The champions of Kalsi and Nakist will build their bridge across the howling abyss into glorious battle. Throughout the long summer into autumn, barbarian raiders came reaving across the border into prosperous Midwold. The ice fishers of Ledansk have been in Bragusland for a year or more, growing more restless with each season that passes. Helma Skodastottir plants her raven banner in Ottery, splitting her attention between rooting out the strong reeds and testing the borders to the east. The Howling Bears, under the standard of Yanya Orandolm, have had their eyes set on the wealth of Midwold since they arrived. With the death of Isa Winterborn, it is as if grief has unhinged their champion, who drives their warband to fight the marchers wherever possible, even when it is perhaps not wise to do so. Their desire for bloodshed is nothing, however, beside that of the traitor Yagara, who gather round the banners of Stefan of Sakom. While the other champion warbands seek wealth and challenge, the Yagara of the Morn look to sate their bloodlust on the Yofolk of Midwold and Bragusland alike. Rumours that other Jotun warbands will not fight alongside Stefan's Yagara for fear of dishonouring themselves and their ancestors have solidified. In desperation, Geirfund Hagastottir has loosened the choke chain King Gudmundur used to control the furious human champion, letting him lead his troops into Midwold in the hope, perhaps, that the marchers will end the problem he represents before the king returns. And so the raids continue after the autumn equinox. The Imperial defenders of Midwold are able to ensure they do not reach much further east than Oddmire, and occasionally Mead March, but their focus is elsewhere. The task of dealing with the raiders falls to the beaters, who patrol the borders, and to the garrison of Fort Fidlis. The valiant Pegasus and the Autumn Hammers have quit Midwold, leaving only the Drakes and the Bloodcloaks in Midwold, and they are busy preparing for what is to come. Fortunately, the absence left by the armies marching north is quickly filled for by the arrival of the Bounders from neighbouring Upwold. A fortnight after the equinox, a grand cohort of elfin knights and goblin-kind infantry folk emerge from an old battlefield in Mead March, drawn from the domain of Elian Iris. Without delay, they march west to join the Imperial armies, splitting into 3 distinct groups, and setting their brightly coloured pavilions and fluttering banners alongside the tents of the Imperial soldiers. To aid the Drakes comes Kor, the lion-maned warlord, glorious in their scarlet armour. They command only half the number of warriors brought by the others, but each of the knights is twice the size of their comrades. While their torso, head, and arms are human-like, their lower bodies are those of deadly predatory cats. These Crimson Knights use their lances to great effect, devastating their enemies with a thundering charge. Sir Helvedan, resplendent in gold and red chain, quietly joins the Bloodcloaks. The Stag Knight leads a mixed band of elfin spearmasters and grizzled goblinkin with shield and javelin. Olavan the Reeve, the sharp-eared bowmaster, comes at the head of a band of wily archers and rust-red hunting hounds. They are eager not only to face their foes, but to test their skill against the marksmen of the Bounders. The knights attract comment wherever they go, their richly coloured garb and merry voices something of a contrast with the fields of Mead March. The Drakes are further reinforced by nearly 5,000 troops led by Imperial captains from every Imperial nation, save the Unshackled. They have come to fight the Jotun. Some offer their aid to the beaters while they wait, but few can keep up with the fast-moving marchers. Others seek the beaters for different reasons, however. Perhaps as many as 9,000 more soldiers wish to sneak across the border into Breakus Land to join the strong Reeds. The expertise of the beaters is tested, but they are found equal to the challenge. Others take the riskier route along the southern shore of the Westmere, with the aid of sailors from Steward's Landing, slipping into the conquered territories through Eel's Landing or isolated fishing villages along the coastline. Fist, Lion, Tower. Once everyone is in place, on a certain day at an appointed hour, the camps are struck. The Drakes, Bounders, and Bloodcloaks begin to move south through the Mead March toward Graven March, towards battle. At the same time, the strong Reeds rise, launching a surprise attack against the Jotun garrison at Graven. With them are 2,000 delicately deadly warriors of the Summer Realm, attired in breathtaking splendour of sky blue and sun gold, the household of Sir Alcedini, the brightly feathered Kingfisher Castellan, who leads them into battle alongside the Breakus forces. The Reeds can't know for sure that help is coming, cut off from the rest of the marchers as they are. They can only trust that if they act, their allies will be there to support them. More than a few Breakus soldiers breathe a sigh of relief when the news that a major Imperial force has crossed the border into the March reaches them. Battle is joined. The Tower of the North, the Fist of Ulven, and the Lion of the North respond quickly, Jotun warriors surging south to intercept the Imperial forces. The rising of the strong Reeds, however, provides a powerful element of surprise. The eyes of the barbarians were to the north, towards Ottery and Fisher's Rock, rather than towards Graven. By the time they realize the attack is underway, the town has been freed from the Jotun. At first it seems as if the whole of Graven March will follow suit, but as the days unfold, that hope begins to fade somewhat. While the initial fighting mostly involves the Tower, the Fist, and the Lion, reinforcements quickly arrive. Some 6,000 Summer Heralds, orc-like warriors with a distinct Leonin cast to their features in crimson steel chain, join the battle. The Knights of the Lady of Summer, they are equally enthusiastic about fighting Imperial troops as they are clashing with their kin from the Summer Realm. In particular, the axe-wielding warriors led by Sir Grumbar, the Hound Knight, seek out every opportunity to contend with the knights of Sir Helvenan, who side with the Bloodcloaks. Only a few days after the fighting begins, the Jotun are further bolstered by some 15,000 Lysambrian orcs. The entire Lysambrian Jotun force of the Hirio, the Kozaron, and the Escuta. Yet even these allies are only sufficient to slow the Imperial advance, not halt it entirely. The Drakes and the Bounders plough straight through the Jotun defenders to meet up with the Strongreeds at Graven. 3 armies of Marcher soldiers fight shoulder to shoulder against the barbarians. The liveries of dozens of Marcher households flutter and dance in the wind from the west, as stubborn Yo-folk face the orcs who bedevil their homelands. The Bloodcloaks swiftly establish a presence at the town that once served as a place for the Navarre to meet with the people of the Marchers, to trade stories of the wider world. And trade herbs, especially valuable Cerulean Mezzarine from the Brass Coast, in return for unique plants gathered in the deep fens. Indeed, while the Bloodcloaks are establishing a field hospital in the little town, they come across a hidden stash of healing herbs concealed beneath the floorboards. Dozens of carefully wrapped packages of true vervain and imperial roseweed, and marrowwort. There is a note, hastily written, wishing whoever finds the herbs well, and expressing the hope that those who use them might remember the striding of Lias' path. It's clear to the Winterfolk that this cache was left by the Navarre trapped in Graven when the Jotun came, in the hope that it would find its way into imperial hands. Of the Navarre themselves, there is no sign. Doubtless they were among those executed by the barbarians when Graven fell. It proves to be a valuable find. The Winterfolk healers have their work cut out for them as they tend to the wounds of their allies. The Jotun may have been put on the back foot by the attack into Gravenmarch, but they have rallied quickly, mounting a solid defence in the face of the Empire's furious assault. Tough as the going is, the Marchers and their allies from the north are equal to the challenge. They liberate several of the smaller households and villages as they expand their control of the march onward from Graven. The arrival of the Sambrians has nudged the butter churn a little, but Imperials rally to the new situation, and as slow as the going is, it looks as if they will ultimately win the battle, if not the war. Then, of course, the other shoe drops, and the bad news arrives in the form of an exhausted grey water messenger from Ottery. Pride of the Marches. The Grey Water is injured, on the verge of collapse when they reach Graven and demand to speak to the Strongreeds. Refusing to rest until they have discharged their duty, there were 4 of them when they set out from Ottery, and only 1 survived the passage through Jotun lines. They did bring a dire message. The Lysambrians are not the only force of Jotun that has come into Bregasland since the autumn equinox. While the Tower and the Fist and the Lion and their Lysambrian allies have been fighting the Empire in Gravenwatch, a massive force of Jotun has gathered in Ottermire, and is sweeping east across the Otterway into Midwold. Perhaps 45,000 Jotun have joined the warbands raiding Ottermire, alongside several thousand crimson and gold-clad knights of the Summer Realm. 8 armies marching up out of Leothaven and Hordaland, through the western fens to Ottery. Rather than join the defence, they barely broke their march before crossing the walkway into Ottermire. For the first time in a century or more, there are Jotun armies in Midwold. The news spreads through the Imperial forces like wildfire. Soldiers of the Drakes demand to be allowed to return home to protect their families, their farms, their friends. Fear that the army might make it as far as Upwold grips the Bounders. Yet, in the end, there are bonds of duty and loyalty that are stronger than the fear they feel. The Empire's forces are too tightly bound up in the fight for Gravenmarch to risk trying to break free and march back north. Everything is focused here, on seizing a foothold in Bregasland. Trying to turn back now would leave 4 armies between the hammer and the anvil, and risk making the situation worse. At the moment, should disaster come upon them, they can retreat into Greenmarch. If they try to turn north, there is every chance they will end up trapped in Gravenmarch, at the mercy of the Jotun. It is a painful decision, but in the end the soldiers of the Marches and Wintermark have little choice but to trust the orders of their generals, and to trust that the defenders of Midwold will be equal to the challenge that faces them. Odds Way. Nearly 15,000 Jotun, 2 full contingents of the Knights of Glory, the Ice Fishers, the Howling Bears, and the Raven Banner of Helmus Godastatio, the traitors of the Morn. They march along the Otterway into Oddmire. No simple raiding party, but a hammer blow against the pride of the Marchers. Normally the Western barbarians invade a territory with a crushing assault, seeking to overwhelm the defenders with furious might and force of numbers. Uncharacteristically, though, the Jotun attacking Midwold seem to be favouring a more cautious strategy. Most likely last season's raids established the presence of defending armies dug in Oddmire. Perhaps the Jotun commanders are simply being cautious of a trap, or careful about overextending their forces. Either way, they focus more on preserving their strength than smashing the Imperial armies, which are not there. The relative slowness of the Jotun response in Bregisland makes more sense if one assumed the barbarians were expecting the Imperial armies to still be in Midwold, rather than launching an attack of their own. 8 armies, well rested and well provisioned from their stay in Leothaven and Hordaland. The Fellhammers and the Iron Host are in the van, with the glory-hungry warriors of Mandola's Roar and Raging Thunder straining against the unfamiliar orders to advance cautiously, rather than slam full strength into whatever Midwold has to offer. The knights that accompany those 2 armies are clearly no happier about this strategy than their orc friends, but they follow their orders. The Howling Knight, the Skjelderborn, and the Shield of the Mountain form the solid core at the heart of the Jotun expeditionary force, with the Southern Bear in the rearward position, grinding relentlessly forward, even as they seek to lock down the land the advance guard claims. The army of Bjorgathorn Hammerhand prides itself on only moving forward, and even though the Jotun come with caution, move forward they do. The defenders of Midwold know about the Jotun invasion before the forces in Gravenmarch. The beaters who watch the borders immediately realise what is happening and raise the alarm. The news spreads eastward, galvanising the garrison of Fort Fildis and sending the Yo-folk and stewards to their armories. Weapons and armour are passed out as the folk of the marches brace themselves for the Jotun advance. Just as with their neighbours to the east and the south, they will not cede 1 inch of ground, save that the barbarians pry from their clenched fists. Messengers are sent to Mournwald and Upwold, telling them of the invasion, and while they do not directly ask for aid, Marchers are proud people, the implication is there. They may be rivals in peacetime, but as both Bregisland and Mournwald have shown, when war comes to the Marches, folk unite against the interloper. This grim pride, the courage of the Yo-folk, is not in vain, but it cannot hope to hold back the Jotun for long. At best, the garrison and the beaters, the households, and the walls of Oddmire can only delay what seems inevitable. Western Oddmire falls, and within a week, the rest of the region follows suit. Odd's End is overwhelmed by the barbarians, forced to open its gates rather than see the entire town flattened by Jotun siege engines. Steward's Landing falls shortly afterwards, without any fighting at all, because Yevery, Strongor, Oddsby, and his entire household have loaded everyone they can onto their boats and slipped across the gullet to Fisk. The winterfolk who once kept a careful eye on the marches to the south welcome them, working with the steward and his levies to ensure that the northern shores of Midwold can be kept supplied, should the worst come to the worst. Despite the relatively cautious strategy, the invasion of Midwold follows a familiar pattern. Wherever they go, the Jotun offer Imperial citizens the choice. Take up arms alongside the Jotun, lay aside the accoutrements of war, and become thralls, or be given a swift and honourable death. Nobody takes the first choice. Most take the second. Few are stubborn enough to face the third. Many families make the decision to retreat before the Jotun, staunchly certain that they will reclaim their land soon enough, when the Drakes return and drive the Jotun back into the western fens. The refugees are welcomed by their neighbours to the east, with the open grumbling about inconvenience. But they are welcomed, and found places to stay. The Walls of Mead. Oddmire is quickly taken, and then the Jotun march on Mead, the first market town and the oldest, the largest settlement south of Clapperheim, the city port of the Marches. Revitalised by the dredging of Westmere, by trade with the Faradon, and by decades of prosperity and security. Mead stands ready to repel the Jotun, just as they did as the Assavean raiders last autumn. Of course, last autumn the Marchers had ample warning of the attack, and the garrison of Fort Fidlis was bolstered by the Drakes. This year, the defenders of Mead are on their own. The city has walls, of course, but while there has been some talk of further work, it has been over a decade since the defences were reinforced by the Senate. The walls are stout, but to stand against 8 armies of Jotun bent on conquest, that would be a challenge, even for a true fortification. There's little doubt that if the Jotun turned southeast into the Downs, even Fort Fidlis would be hard-pressed to keep them out. So the Jotun come up through Mead March towards the pride of the Marchers. The people turn back the Assaveans, and they fight just as valiantly as against the Jotun. But they are outnumbered, and ultimately outmatched. A Jotun messenger offers the people of Mead one chance to surrender, but if anything, the proud refusal of the defenders both impresses and pleases the herald sent to deliver the offer. She returns to the armies, and they waste no time besieging the city. Not that it is a siege in any literal sense. The soldiers of Fort Fidlis garrison the walls as best they can, but as the gates are riven to splinters by Jotun battering rams almost immediately, the warriors of the west pour into Mead, and those who fight back are swiftly overwhelmed. This is a city of prosperity, of clever merchants and wise scholars, not a city of warriors after all. The remaining garrison retreats east. A great many Marchers stay behind, refusing to give up their homes. They watch sullenly as the Jotun establish a command post in Mead, from which to direct the rest of their forces. With the city fallen, there is little chance for the households of Mead March to mount more than a token defence. Yet with the aid of the beaters and the Fort Fidlis soldiers, they do their best, and their courage at least helps to slow the Jotun invasion and give time for the rest of Midwold to prepare for what is to come. As it is, the march is conquered, and the Jotun continue to press forward into the heart of the Marchers. As the bulk of the Jotun move to back up the raiders attacking the meadows, however, Stephen of Succom sends his Yagara to round up the remaining elders of Mead and their families to hang them, sending others to try and capture the bailiffs of Mead and the Grand Market, the Elder of Mead, and even the Master of the Root and Stern, so they can face similar treatment. Before he can do much more than give the order, he and his people are confronted by Helma Skodastatir and her warband. Denouncing him as a coward and unfit to call himself Jotun, Helma herself challenges him to defend his honour. Actual fighting between the orcs of Helma's Raven Banner and Stephen's Yagara Banner breaks out in the centre of Mead. Bjorgathorn Hammerhand, General of the Southern Bear, is forced to send his own warriors to separate the two warbands, but not before several fighters on both sides are slain. He does not bother to hide his utter contempt for Stephen, and his clear support for Helma in this matter. According to witnesses, it looks as if the traitor Marchers are squaring up to actually take on the Southern Bear. But in the end they back down and retreat from Mead, with their tails between their legs. It becomes common knowledge that Bjorganthorn has dispatched messengers to the north, to King and Queen, demanding that something be done about the rabid dog in the midst of the Jotun, before he is forced to deal with the matter himself. Flies like Stephen aside, though, the rest of the Jotun invasion goes off with barely a hitch. After Oddmire and Mead March, the Jotun press heavily into the meadows. Northeastern Midwold borders Whittle Grove, some of the only dry land in the whole of Calavesa, and allows easy access to Stockmarch in Upwold. If the Jotun can secure it, and secure their lines across northern Midwold, the threat they represent is multiplied significantly. Yet, despite their fervour and their sheer numbers, their invasion slows and begins to falter once they hit the meadows. As the winter solstice approaches, the weather worsens significantly. Torrential rains give way to heavy snowfall in the approach to midwinter, and while the Jotun are no strangers to cold and snow, they are not foolhardy enough to throw themselves into the teeth of the storm while there are defenders still fighting. Across the northern marches, camps are established, as the Jotun make the preparations needed to keep what they have taken so far, and presumably to conquer Midwold until the entire pride of the Marches is in their hands. Between beats. It is easy to imagine that every warrior in the Jotun lands is in the Marches. 6 armies in Bregisland fighting the Empire's attempts to liberate Gravenmarch. 8 armies in Midwold. Thousands of would-be champions fighting under the banners of their warlords, even as thousands of Imperial captains fight in support of the armies of the Empire. Knights of glory on both sides, urging their compatriots to fight boldly, to never give nor ask for quarter, to seek to build enduring legends that will live on in songs of the bards long after their bodies are gone and rot into tree roots. The fighting in Bregisland has been bloody. 3,000 Imperial heroes dead or broken. The number would have been higher without the Bloodcloaks. The Jotun have suffered more grievous losses simply because they lack the medical experts of the Winterfolk. Their losses closer to 4,000. The Empire is 4/5 of the way toward taking Gravenmarch from the barbarians. But the fighting continues. Behind them, the armies of the West rampage across Midwold, slowed by the stubborn defenders. But only a little. Oddmire and Meadmarch, and the city of Mead are in their hands. They are halfway towards claiming the whole of the meadows, and who knows where their ambition will take them after that. The ultimate goal of the Jotun may be unclear, but one thing is clear. The Marchers will not give up without a fight. Not in Midwold, and not anywhere else. The Jotun have been beaten before, time and time again, and this time will be no different. Just as the strong reeds fight for the people of Bregisland, just as the Tusks battled the odds and risked everything to free their folk in Mordwold, the people of Midwold trust that the Drakes will be back and make the Jotun pay a high price for their trespasses. Game information. The Empire is 4/5 of the way toward claiming Gravenmarch. The Jotun have conquered Oddmire and Meadmarch, and are halfway towards claiming the meadows. All titles connected to the city of Mead have lost access to their resources. Following the battle opportunity in autumn, the Jotun have struck back against the strong reeds, causing them to take 200 casualties. They have now risen up, however, openly fighting the barbarians. As such, the information the Jotun scouts gathered about their movements and dispositions is no longer useful. If the strong reeds choose to start lying low again, they will not face any ongoing losses, unless and until the Jotun are able to scour the territory for them once again. The counter on their ability to rise up would be reset at this point, given they still maintain an absolute support from the Bregas people. Alternatively, they could leave the territory without any difficulty, either alone or with other Imperial armies. Their Imperial forces have not taken Gravenmarch, but they are 4/5 of the way there. While the route they entered Bregisland by has been cut off, Oddmire and Meadmarch being in Jotun hands, there is nothing to stop them retreating into the Mournwold, or even circling round through Mournwold into Golden Downs or Maiden Downs. If they wish to return to Midwold directly, into Oddmire or Meadmarch, they will have to fight the Jotun to do so. The strong reeds continue to prevent the resources in Bregisland from suffering the penalty for being in a conquered territory. The city of Mead is in Jotun hands. While they are not going out of their way to loot the place, there is still massive disruption here. As such, the Bailiff of Mead, the Bailiff of the Grand Market, Master of the Root and Stem, and Alder of Mead have all lost access to their production, whether sinecure or ministry. The titles still exist, they simply can't wield their powers to secure resources. In addition, the Baldur's Hall in Mead is now in Jotun hands, and unfortunately that means it is no longer possible for beaters to beat the bounds in Midwold. There is nothing to stop characters instead supporting Fort Fedlis, but they won't receive any income for doing so, unless that action is assigned the Gurden shares. Likewise, until Oddmare and Steward's Landing are once again in Marcher hands, it is no longer possible for Marcher fleets to take the Raid Calce's coastline voyage. Participation, Beaters and Bloodcloaks. Characters who took the Beating the Bounds or Raid Calce's coastline actions have had a busy season. The General of the Bloodcloaks retains some of the healing herbs recovered from the Navarre herb cache in Graven. Any character who took the Beat the Bounds venture in Midwold this season, or who undertook the Raid Calce's coastline voyage, is encouraged to roleplay their part in the events taking place in the Marches. In particular, They may have been involved in helping military units sneak into Bregasland, join the strong Reeds, help deliver the desperate warning of the Jotun assault to the defenders of Midwold, or been involved in evacuating Stewart's Landing. If your military unit or fleet supported one of these actions, you may have been injured engaging in risky heroism against the Jotun. Anyone who did so can email plot@profounddecisions.co.uk before the end of March and request a lingering wound, sustained in the campaign. A lingering wound can help support your role-playing on the field as one of the defenders of Midwold. Bear in mind, however, that, if left untreated, lingering wounds can also be fatal. The Navarre herb cache uncovered by the Bloodcloaks in Graven has been distributed to the healers of the Wintermark army, but a portion has also been set aside for the general. As such, Tager, defender of the fallen Tiershult, will find 6 drams of each of the 5 medicinal herbs in their pack, all that remains of this bounty. Participation: Knights of Glory. Characters whose military unit fought with the Drakes, the Bounders, or the Strong Reeds receive a special benefit. The Knights of Glory who fought alongside the Drakes, Bounders, and Strong Reeds revel in the uncompromising tactics the 3 armies employed. As is their wont, they communicate some of their enthusiasm to the soldiers who fight alongside them. A character whose military unit supported one of these 3 armies may choose to have been impacted by the experience of battling in close proximity to the heralds of Eleonaris. If you possess the hero skill, you may choose to increase your number of hero points by 1 until the end of the winter solstice. If you do not have the hero skill, you gain an additional temporary hero point which, once spent, is permanently gone. It will have faded entirely by the end of the winter solstice regardless. Anyone who chooses to gain this benefit also experiences a role-playing effect that lasts until the end of the winter solstice. You feel the urge to do great deeds that will make you the centre of attention, and take particular pleasure from approval and adulation. You feel the urge to do things that demonstrate your prowess as a powerful warrior. Being overlooked or dismissed may cause you to lose your temper.